When abducted, the Muse Brothers tried to escape and return to their mother. The circus concocted a disturbing plan for revenge. Furious that they had lost such valuable assets, the circus decided to take the Muse Brothers to court for a breach of contract, but it was a massive mistake, which showed a glimpse at the innate, dark nature of the Muse Brothers' story. George and Willie Muse, born to Harriet Muse in Truvine, Virginia during the late 19th century, faced a harsh start in life. As impoverished African-American sharecroppers in Jim Crow South, their prospects were bleak from the beginning, but their misfortunes were about to take a darker turn. The Muse brothers were born with albinism, a rare genetic condition that gave them pale, almost white skin. This rarity made them targets of curiosity and, sadly, prejudice. Their unique appearance marked them as different and exposed them to the harshness of societal cruelty. Albinism wasn't their only struggle. Both brothers also had nystagmus, a condition that caused their vision to deteriorate gradually. This compounded, making their already challenging lives even harder as their sight slowly faded away. Despite their several health issues, George and Willie were expected to help in the fields. Their albinism made them unable to endure much time under the harsh Virginia sun, but they still did their best to contribute to their family's survival. Their efforts were met with harsh realities. Nystagmus exacerbated their suffering, causing extreme sensitivity to light. By the time they were young boys, the Muse brothers had deep lines etched in their foreheads from squinting against the sun's glare. Their lives were challenging, and the worst was yet to come. The exact details of what happened next are murky, but it's clear that the Muse brothers' lives were about to change dramatically. Their time under their mother's protection was ending, and a new chapter of exploitation was about to begin. Harriet, their mother, faced an impossible choice. Unable to provide for her sons and fearing the future in a racially divided Virginia, she decided that they needed a different kind of life. Her drastic decision would lead to their fateful journey away from home. Rumor has it that Harriet sold her sons to the circus promoter, James Herman Shelton, when his circus came through town. This act of desperation was meant to save them from a life of hardship, but it led them to a different kind of nightmare. Another darker version of the story suggests that Shelton lured the boys away with candy. This wasn't a fairy tale. Once he had them in his grasp, there was no magical escape for the brothers. Their ordeal was only just beginning. It's likely that Harriet allowed Shelton to promote her sons temporarily, expecting them to return home. Instead, Shelton abducted them, taking them far away from their mother and life in Truvine. Evidence strongly suggests that George and Willie didn't go with Shelton willingly. According to the biographer Beth Macy, the brothers' accounts for their abduction are the most credible, confirming that they were taken against their will. By 1899, the brothers were on display as a part of Shelton's freak show. They endured humiliation and demeaning acts as part of their public display, a far cry from their lives they had known before their abduction. They were advertised as ministers from Dahomey, a now defunct African kingdom. This was just one of the many false identities forced upon them. The brothers' portrayal as Eastman's monkey men and Ethiopian monkey men were one of the many dehumanizing roles they were made to play. Their treatment was cruel and inhumane, reflecting the circus' complete disregard for their dignity. Shelton dehumanized the Muse brothers even further by referring to them as the missing link between apes and humans. This outrageous claim was a part of a broader effort to exploit their uniqueness for profit. Two naive, unworldly circus members, the albino Muse brothers, were a somewhat frightening anomaly. These crowds would believe anything. For example, they would have believed that the brothers were not from Earth, they were aliens, and Shelton knew it. He sometimes referred to the brothers as Echo and Eco, ambassadors from Mars. This, along with the outrageous acts the brothers had to perform on stage, shows the extent at which the circus would go to profit from the brothers' disease. The Muse Brothers were forced to perform grotesque stunts, including eating raw meat and biting the heads off live snakes. These humiliating acts were designed to shock and entertain, masking the brothers' true talents and desires. Despite the circus's cruel treatment, the Muse Brothers had remarkable talent for music. They could play several instruments, including the banjo, saxophone, and ukulele, showcasing skills that went unnoticed by their exploiters. Willie, for instance, could play a song perfectly after hearing it just once. Their talent was a bittersweet reminder of their potential, overshadowed by their suffering. The circus managers perpetuated a web of lies to keep the brothers from attempting to escape. They convinced George and Willie that returning home was impossible and their mother was dead, further isolating them. Isolated in captivity, trapped by lies, the Muse Brothers longed to go home and be with their family, even if it meant working the fields, but Shelton never let them believe it was possible. Shelton told the boys, "Be quiet. Your mom is dead. There's no use in even asking about her." It was hard for the boys to hear this. It was also a dirty lie. The most heartbreaking part of Shelton's lie was how much the boys loved their mother. Despite the uncertain circumstances of how they had come to be prisoners in the circus, they never held grudge against their family. In fact, Willie Muse kept a tiny framed photograph of his mother, Harriet, at his bedside. Soon, however, even that faded photograph wouldn't be able to fill the hole in Willie's heart. As he grew older, nystagmus took his vision away and he started going blind. His vision would fade to black long before his mother's photograph would fade to dust. Fortunately, he would get to see her again, but the road back to her was long and cruel. With no other apparent options, the Muse Brothers continued to work for the circus. They traveled all over the country and headlined everywhere they went. But no matter how hard they worked together, they never had more than 2 pennies to rub together. The circus were profiting off the Muse Brothers in every way imaginable. Audiences were so intrigued by the brothers that they were willing to splurge. Crowds lined up for $30 a pop just to take pictures with the brothers, but sadly, George and Willie never saw a cent. Allegedly, the brothers could easily make the circus $32,000 a day, and yet they barely had enough to survive. Most people in the world don't see $32,000 in a year, far less in a single day. Despite their earning potential, it's not clear that they could even afford the bus ticket back home to run away from the circus. The following is what the biographer Beth Macy recounted from the treatment that the Muse Brothers received from their carny managers. Later, showmen bragged about buying them from our carnival and then selling them to another like they were cattle. So there's no question they were exploited. There's no question they were worked for many years without pay. The brothers spent years living in the same routine of exploitation. Little did they know, a big change was on the horizon. They received better treatment under the management of the Ringling Brothers. After all, the managers were brothers themselves, but they still did their best to erase all traces of the Muse Brothers' tragic story. Much like Shelton, they came up with elaborate, unlikely stories about how the brothers came to be in the circus. As the circus traveled, John Ringling advertised the brothers as his albino assets. Newspapers perpetuated the myth that they were found floating off the coast of Madagascar, adding to their mystery. Although the brothers were certainly adrift, they were never lost at sea. These lies fulfilled a few different purposes. Firstly, it ensured the brothers didn't try to escape themselves, which was another reason they didn't get paid. Secondly, it stopped some of the questions from the crowds of the origin of the brothers. and also it added to the mystery, which made the crowds even more interested in the brothers and increased ticket sales. The scientific community's interest in the Muse Brothers provided a disturbing validation for the eugenicist theory. Their unique conditions made them subjects for intense scrutiny and prejudice. The Ringling Brothers supplied a photograph of the Muse Brothers to eugenist Amram Scheinfeld. This image was used for promoting twisted scientific theories. In his book, You and Heredity, Scheinfeld described the brothers in detail, highlighting their albinism and physical traits. His observations, however, served a darker agenda. Unknown to the Muse Brothers, their 13 years of torment were about to come to an end. Back in Virginia, their mother Harriet was very much alive and had never forgotten about her sons. All of these years later, and Harriet had no way of knowing if her sons were even alive. That is to say, she had no way of knowing except divine intervention. The way Harriet told the story is that one day she had a dream that her boys were back in Virginia. As it happened, the Ringling Circus was, in fact, coming to town. When the brothers arrived in Roanoke, Virginia with the Ringling Circus, a poster held the caption, "Are they from Mars?" The poster claimed that the brothers had emerged from the middle of the Mojave Desert, but the crowds that attended the circus on that day were in for a different kind of show. During their performance of It's a Long Way to Tipperary, George and Willie noticed a black woman pushing through the crowd. They recognized her immediately. It was their mother. The brothers stopped their performance in disbelief. "There's our mother," George exclaimed. "Look, Willie, she's not dead." Freedom was finally within sight. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Either it was an illusion or they were seeing a ghost. Or perhaps their hardship was finally coming to an end. George and Willie rushed to their mother for a long-awaited reunion. However, the circus managers weren't going to let them go without a fight. Shelton rushed over to find out what was happening. Shelton confronted Harriet and the Muse Brothers, but Harriet stood firm, refused to leave without her sons. The situation escalated until the authorities arrived. Harriet explained to the officers that she had allowed her sons to travel with the circus to make extra money, but Shelton had abducted them against her wishes. Her courage to stand up to the authorities was unwavering. The officers, realizing that the Muse Brothers were not the exotic beings that the circus had portrayed them to be, allowed them to go free. George and Willie Muse were finally able to return home and reunite with their family. Both Shelton and the Ringling Brothers were furious they had lost such valuable assets, so they planned a terrible revenge. They decided to take the Muse Brothers to court for a breach of contract, but it was a massive mistake. Harriet didn't just fend off the legal attacks against her sons, she fought back and won the brothers a massive settlement in stolen wages. The Muse Brothers were able to renegotiate their contract with the Ringling Brothers. This time they would be able to keep the money they brought to the circus. They agreed to return to Echo and Eco, sheep-headed cannibals from Ecuador, but for once, they owned their own narrative, and their new and improved act took them all the way across the sea. When the brothers got true recognition for their own work, as well as fair compensation, this is when their notoriety took off. Now, with sufficient resources, the brothers were able to put on their own spectacles, aside from what they were doing with the circus previously. There's no official records to prove it, but many sources claim that the Muse Brothers had a royal audience. They did deftly travel to the UK, and they claimed that they performed at Buckingham Palace for the king. One imagines that they stuck to plain instruments and didn't bite the head off any snakes or guests. With the earnings, the Muse Brothers managed to save up enough money to send some back to their mother in Virginia. She was able to buy a farm with the money that her son sent back and passed peacefully as a black landlord in Jim Crow South. The Muse Brothers, for their part, would also have a happy ending. Throughout their hardship, the Muse Brothers always had each other, until they didn't anymore. Despite their rare genetic conditions, health complications, and low life expectancies, both lived to ripe old ages. Willie, for example, outlived all of his former managers and passed in 2001 at 108 years of age, happy and free. If you enjoyed this video, we'd highly appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. You're also invited to check out the companion article in the description. Last but not least, if you'd like to see more videos on historical figures, please subscribe to the channel.